Sounds good. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the Dead Man Walking podcast. I am your host, Repeatedly Dead Fred, and I have a memoir coming out March 9th, The Summer I Died 20 Times, which is a true story. And that's how I got the name Repeatedly Dead Fred. Makes sense, right? Today I am doing a segment on emerging authors and writing people and all sorts of stuff like that. And I'm very excited to have John Hunt with us. John is maybe the Canadian equivalent of Stephen King. He's a very creepy guy. And I do you have like nine books out? Is that something?
I have five full-length novels, one
Mm-hmm.
novella, a book of short stories, and then a bunch of short stories and anthologies that were published over the
Okay.
years. So
So you've been a busy boy.
yes,
And then we'll talk about
trying
your
to be.
background, which
Okay.
uh, which makes it even more impressive to me that you had any time to write. So,
Okay.
okay, so do you want to
Yeah.
start maybe with like how did you get into writing?
So I always wanted to do it. I've been reading like a maniac since I was probably 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I used to get in trouble for it in school because I'd read during French class, right? And try to hide it from the teacher, but they'd catch me doing it. But so
Mm-hmm.
I just read a lot, and so I've always interested in that aspect of uh, communicating creepy tales, right? So I think the creepiness came in when I was really younger. My parents, were busy working all the time, and I was usually hanging out with my older sisters, and horror movies would come on the TV, and they wouldn't tell me to leave. So I'm like
Mm-hmm.
6 years old. I was watching Halloween
Mm-hmm.
and terrified within the first 10 minutes, slept at the end of my parents' bed for a month, but I was hooked ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then from there, it was like movies and books and music. Those are my three things I happen to love a lot. And
Okay.
then I didn't do I didn't do too well in school. I just kind of stopped going there for a bit, and then it was like um, I had to go back to school in order to get into college. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
take a college entrance exam, and I nailed that. And then I was in college to go for writing and stuff like that. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
uh, I was pretty poor growing up. My family was very poor, so we
Mm-hmm.
couldn't pay for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in order for me to go to I did a semester at less than a semester at York University. I just because I was
Okay.
working and going to school, and it was like, okay, well, I can't afford this. I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have done it with OSAP and stuff, but it would, when you come out of that, you're looking at 50, $60,000 potentially in debt,
Mm-hmm.
and which I'm not a fan of. So then I just went back um, to police foundations. It's kind of like a college course that you have to take. Well, you should take before you become a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a lot of background, and if you do take it, it shows the police service that you're serious, and you have a better chance of being hired. Nowadays, they have like co-op where you can ride around with the police officers, but back then it wasn't that way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, so it's pretty interesting nowadays. But so I did that, and then within a year of doing the schooling for that, me and my wife had our first child. And then,
Okay.
but while I was going to college, I was um, going to school during the day and then working afternoon shifts, right? So I did that for
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years. Um, so I was always kind of busy that way. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I was done with that, um, you know, uh, got hired on uh, as a police officer with Peel Regional Police. I was there for 6 years, and then I transferred out to Guelph,
Mm-hmm.
um, where I'm still working now. And so we ended up having four kids. My oldest is he went to Toronto Film School, and now he's working downtown Toronto and lives out there.
Mm-hmm.
And my oldest daughter is in Ottawa University, and then my two younger ones are still at home.
Hmm.
And my wife really, really, really loves children. So we also foster younger children. Like we don't foster usually children over the age of 4. So it's 4 and
Okay.
under that we usually foster. And right up front with it, my wife does most of that, right? Like I'm
Hmm.
there, I help out, I do what I can, but she's like 90% of that. That's what she does. That's what she's passionate about. And she's amazing with them. And like I said, it's only when she can't do something will she ask me to do something. You know what I mean? So for and she's very independent, so most of the time she does mostly all
Hmm.
of it. Now that being said, when I'm at home, I make dinner for everyone, and I play with them, and I do stuff like that. But
Hmm.
for the primary care, she's the primary caregiver for
Hmm.
all of that. Yeah.
I think the first time we chatted, I think it was via Facebook Messenger. You told me you had to go because you were had to go make dinner for the kids.
Yes. Yes. So when I'm at home and I can, I make dinner because it just takes one less burden off Louise.
Hmm.
So like when I work nights, I usually work from 7 at night till 7 in the morning. So I'll make
Hmm.
dinner before I go in the nights, and then on days is the day shifts, which work 7 to 7. That's the only time Louise typically makes dinner. Is
Hmm.
because I'm not home in time to make dinner for everyone, right? But
Hmm.
I only have those shifts are about, I want to say, 7 times a month. So like
Okay.
7 times a month, she'll have to make dinner for them. The majority of the times I'll make dinner the other days, but sometimes she'll make dinner based upon the circumstances or what's going on, right?
Sure. So, can we take a step back all the way to how you became so creepy and how you gained an affinity for police work? So, are your sisters also super creepy, and is your wife also super creepy? Or
My wife has no interest in horror or anything of that nature. Like she watched Scream and a couple of those films with me, but other than
Mhm.
that, she's not into horror. She'll watch
Mhm.
it because, but mostly because my kids wanted to watch it, like my older ones, because it was
Mhm.
kind of popular, right? And
Mhm.
but she won't watch typically. She's not a fan of horror at all. Uh,
Mhm.
my oldest sister, um, she's a private detective, so
Oh, okay.
something along the same lines. And then I have another one who was a corporate lawyer, but now she's a therapist.
Mhm.
Um, and then my other sister is like a medical transcriptionist,
Mhm.
and then there's me, right? And
Mhm.
it's one of those things where it's like policing was always interesting to me because of the potential for different characters, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of interesting people in policing itself, and the people that you talk to are very interesting.
Mhm.
And it's like you read serial killer books, you read stuff like that, and it's like it'd be cool to have the opportunity to maybe take part in an investigation of that nature. So it's just something that was kind of interesting to me, and but writing was always the thing I wanted to do. And it's just, but
Mhm.
you know what it's like, you can't pay the bills with that unless you have a name, right?
Mhm.
Unless and that's what really it is. You're just trying to build your name as a product. So
Mhm.
like people won't even wait for the reviews on a Stephen King book, they'll just buy it, right?
Right.
Because they know the name, they know, okay, out of the 40 books that he's written, I've loved 38 of them, so I'll give him another shot, right? So without even thinking about it. And it's the same with me. Like I do the same thing. If John Sanford comes out with a book, I usually just read it without even thinking about
Mhm.
waiting for reviews or anything like that, right? So there's a few authors that I will definitely buy without thinking or
Mhm.
waiting for reviews because you trust them. And they've built out their product name, which is why you trust
Mhm.
them. So that's typically the hard part, especially when you have a smaller publisher. They just, my publisher's doing the best that he can, They're doing the
Mhm.
best. They're doing great work. They're doing. I'm really grateful to them. It's just they don't have the resources that say Simon and Schuster does, right?
For
So
sure.
that yeah, that publisher puts out a book and they're like they have 5 or 6 reviewers on the hook to say, hey, you want to look at this book immediately, right? They'll have a Kirkus
Mhm.
review person, they'll have a New York Times person. They'd be able to reach out to them immediately and get that book reviewed. Whereas, the smaller publishers don't have that, although, you know,
Mhm.
they're like I said, they do great work and um, they do amazing work with what limited resources they have.
Mhm. And so we'll give them a small plug. Black Rose Writing,
Yep.
from just outside of San Antonio, and they're
Mm-hmm.
also doing the publishing for my book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and to be honest, I had no idea everything that had to be done to get a book published beyond writing it. It's just kind of mind-boggling. So kudos to
Yes.
you. Um,
Yes.
so how long have you
Mhm.
been getting books published? Like this is 20 years, maybe?
No, so I
No?
started uh maybe 12 years. So I,
Mm-hmm.
I first got a short story published when I was like 36, 37.
Mm-hmm.
So and then Dollhouse was published in 2016.
Okay.
So I typically do a book a year
Mm-hmm.
and depending on what I'm doing. This year I'm doing what I call the ludicrous challenge. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
attempting to write 3 books in one year.
Wow.
So I've got one down and I'm almost done the second.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like first draft only, right? It's not,
Mm-hmm.
not, you go over book 80, not 80, but a lot of times afterwards you've written it to pare
Yeah.
it down, right? So, but
Mm-hmm.
so it's only first draft, but yeah, so um, that's what I'm working on right now. So this by the end of this year, I should have 3 books ready to go.
So is this a competition or just a personal
No, it's just a
challenge that they put
challenge.
out?
Challenge I set for myself. What I was trying to do is um, write 1,000 words a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I write 1,000 words a day, within 2.5 months, that's 80,000 words. That's a typical
Mm-hmm.
book, right? So you're not going to get 1,000 words a day because I stopped over the holidays with family and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I did it within 3 months, so it was kind of good that way. So if you're looking at it, if you do 1,000 words a day, that's like 365,000 words a year, and divided by 80,000, that's over four
Mm-hmm.
books you can do in a year, right? Just over four
Mm-hmm.
books.
Yeah.
If you do 1,000 words a day, not all of them are going to get published. My main goal was to do some writing every day, just
Mm-hmm.
to kind of, the consistency to me is key. It's like if you're writing every day, where you left off after that 1,000 words, um,
Mm-hmm.
the next morning when you're ready to write again, you've been thinking about what you're going to write since, and you haven't forgotten what you wrote previously, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it's like when I was doing writing before, I'd sometimes, based on circumstances, I wouldn't get back to it after 2 months, and then I'd go over
Mm-hmm.
what I'd read, and then I'd be like, okay, this is no good. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'd be like editing
Yeah.
what I read, and I wouldn't start writing for a while, right? So if when I do it every day, um, it just the flow is more consistent. The characters are still developed. I don't lose time or places or the narrative. It's just for me, it's working out really well.
Mm-hmm. When over the pandemic, and that was my goal was to write 1,000 words a day
Mm-hmm.
during the work week, and I found that I also was doing a lot of editing while I was writing. So,
Yes.
I was cutting into the 1,000 I had written the day before and the day before and rearranging sentences and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it really does um, get into your blood like that or your brain. So,
Mm-hmm.
are most of your ideas from just your fertile mind, or does some of it come from police work? So, for the people in the audience who don't know, John is obviously a police officer now, but he was a homicide detective, which
Yes.
you explained to me might not be as glorious as it looks on TV.
Well, for me, I was the warrant writer. So in Canada, the warrants are uh, pretty extensive. We have
Hmm.
to develop reasonable grounds, which is, I can give you the definition: the set of facts or circumstances that would cause an ordinary, cautious, and prudent person to believe and goes beyond mere suspicion. So pretty
Hmm.
much, it has to be what the person. You have to lay out factual groundwork in order
Hmm.
for a judge to authorize whatever you're asking for.
Hmm.
So for that, as a warrant writer, you have to know everything that's happened in the investigation up to that date. You have to document that you've read it. You have to document all that type of stuff, right? So I got to know whenever a murder or a suspicious death happened, I got to know everything about that case. And I was um, obviously become very procedural minded because
Hmm.
you have to, there's rules that you have to follow in order to collect that evidence. So um, yeah, so I wouldn't say for my ideas are just a lot of times they come when I wake up in the middle of the night,
Hmm.
or if I'm out, or if I'm out for a walk.
Hmm.
Because I have a dog, I walk him every day. And if I'm out for a walk, an idea will hit me, and I'll just note it in my phone or do whatever, right? Um, Nothing really comes from my police work except for I know how the Canadian police or the Ontario police or officers in Ontario would investigate a crime. So I
Hmm.
know the procedural aspects of all of that, which is, half the battle. I sometimes when you're doing movies, when you're writing books with detectives in it or police in it, you have to figure out
Hmm.
what they would do. I already know all that, right? Because of my
Hmm.
job. So that's kind of helpful that way.
So in real life, were there any warrants you were writing up and you said, "Oh, for sure, it's this guy," like cut and dry, even without this warrant, we know this guy or this person did it, but we still have to, cross the T's and dot the I's and all that stuff.
So it's interesting. In Canada, that we have this major case management protocol,
Hmm.
and it was developed. Have you ever heard of the Paul Bernardo? Have you ever heard of him?
Yes, yes, that's
So
creepy personified.
yeah, so after he uh, wasn't caught, well, actually, after he was caught, they went through the investigation. They're trying to figure out could they have caught him sooner.
Hmm.
So throughout the investigation, I think 4 or 5 people wrote in tips that said, "Look at Paul Bernardo. Look at Paul Bernardo." And but because they got 10,000 tips sometimes a day, they missed them, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So so which is reasonable. That's a lot of tips, and the police services, because he crossed jurisdictions, weren't necessarily
Hmm.
communicating with each other, and so the information that they had in Toronto wasn't they didn't have in Burlington. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
um, after that, a judge ordered that there'd be a overhaul of how police do investigations, and what came out of it was a major case manual. Um, so from that, you have to follow certain rules. So you can't,
Hmm.
if whatever lead comes up, even if it's ridiculous, you have to follow
Hmm.
it right to the end. Um, any tip that gets entered into a database, and the database would tell you this person's name has come up this many times from these many people. So it catches everything, and it makes if you have the evidence and you have it going well, it makes the case really hard for the defense to shake, right? Because
Hmm.
you've done everything the defense would ask you to do because it's part of
Hmm.
this major case management protocol. Sometimes they'll say, "Have you looked at this guy? This guy was here or there." You go, "Yep, we looked at this guy. This is why he couldn't have done it. These are the reasons why," right? You have to follow through. If you don't follow through, you get into a lot of trouble.
Hmm.
So um, so it's for knowing who the person was, we're not allowed to know who the person was unless the evidence is definitive. So
Hmm.
if there's like 5 names that come up, you investigate those 5 names until you can prove definitively that those other 4 people were not involved and it would only be this one person.
Mhm.
It's very interesting. So they, on the course that when I did it, um, they used the major case management model for shootings that were happening out in California, highway shootings.
Mhm.
So they used that, and that they entered in all the information into the database. It spit out who the person was, and they caught him, and then they scrapped it because it was too expensive. So I'm like,
Wow.
yeah, that's from what I understand. I could be incorrect on that, but they were talking
Mhm.
about that on the course, right? But
Mhm.
but this major case management model is only in Ontario, so it's not in
Mhm.
the other provinces. But now, like, so say if OPP, they're covering way up north, right? Like Upper Rubber Boot, let's say, and then they get some rape that has, or sexual assault that has these specifics to it, and the same thing happens in Southern Ontario, like maybe a month later. The power case, the major case management software database would link those two and tell the two services that you have possibly have the same perpetrator, and you should join your share evidence in relation to that. So there's no
That's amazing.
way. Yeah, so it's like, when you hear like highway killers in the states or wherever, where they go
Mhm.
from state to state, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen. You would know you would have a highway killer a lot earlier because all the databases are linked.
Mhm. So, but I guess we still have like the interprovincial things that aren't linked so nicely.
Yeah, so interprovincial, no, but a lot of the provinces are getting on board with it. They just weren't mandated to. Ontario
Mhm.
was mandated to, like, you shall do this police service, right? So
Mhm.
other provinces that aren't mandated are actually taking a look at it. Like when I was on the course, they sent a couple of people out from Alberta, did people from the RCMP on the course, like
Mhm.
to get the specifics of the database. They had people from the army on it. Um, it was really interesting. So it is
Mhm.
getting out there because the efficacy of it is, you can't deny it. It works, right? Um,
Mhm.
it's very effective, and like I said, the reason why I like it a lot is because there's no, like, it eliminates officer bias, right? It
Mhm.
eliminates tunnel vision. You can't have tunnel vision when you're using this software.
Mhm.
If you try to ignore the other things that it tells you to do, you will get in trouble for it. Like your boss will come down on you, everyone will come down on you, the crown attorney will come
Mhm.
on down on you. Like you cannot ignore anything that comes in. So I like
Interesting.
it that way. Yeah, so it's fair, right? So you certainly don't want to put an innocent person in jail. Like
Mhm.
that's like, I think that's one of the most horrific things ever. And um, I feel that this model mitigates the chances of that significantly.
Well, that was a direction I really didn't think we were going to go down, but it's fascinating stuff to me nonetheless. Because I think, we see what's on TV, which is probably not a great reflection of how
No.
officers really do the job. So going back to writing a bit, are you
Yeah.
ever a character in your books? Or are
So
there
I don't
elements
know.
of you?
I would say yes. I would say there's probably elements of me in every character. Um,
Mhm.
so it's like I tend to write uh, like the main protagonist would be like usually a broken character. Not
Mhm.
always, but they're usually a broken character. They're suffering some from sort of addiction or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
And I have a pretty addictive personality,
Mhm.
so I can understand that fairly well, right? So I smoked for years, right? And
Mhm.
I stopped doing that. It's one of those, you have the cognitive dissonance, right? You're like, I know it's bad for me, but
Mhm.
I'll do that. I'll kick it tomorrow. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
one of those things where it's like, but I still run and I lift weights, so that's good, right? That's good.
Mhm.
And then you're still doing the negative healthy habits, right?
Mhm.
Um, you know, my mother was suffered from alcoholism for a long time, so I saw what that
Mhm.
was, right? So it's like I understand the you don't truly understand other people, like you never can, but understand the characteristics of an addiction and um, how much it can deteriorate a person, right? So
Hmm.
that's sometimes incorporated into a lot of my work.
Hmm. And
And
I think
I
people can
thought,
relate to that.
yeah, well, we all have that, right? Like
Hmm.
we all do things we know we shouldn't do, right?
Hmm.
It may not be such a destructive addiction, but at the same time, you know you shouldn't do it, and you still do it anyways, and you like
Hmm.
kind of beat yourself up about it, right?
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, so I think that's very relatable, right?
Hmm. So, what's the best review you think you've gotten, or the one that meant the most to you?
Hmm.
Or are you like,
So
oh, I
there's
have no ego, I don't look at those things?
oh, I look at every one of them actually. So like on
Hmm.
Goodreads, they'll put up all the ratings and stuff.
Hmm.
So I'll look up at if you're right taking the time to write a review, whether it's good or
Hmm.
bad, I'm gonna look at it because you can learn from them, right? So if someone said to me, um, someone gave a poor review and said, you know, in this portion of the book you did this, 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 and this, which I didn't
Hmm.
like. And I looked at it, I'm like, huh, they're right. So then I
Hmm.
won't do that again, right? I've learned from that, right? I'm not going to do that again. And so I think the negative reviews are just as helpful as positive reviews. So I look
Hmm.
at all of them, right? Now, one of them one time said, which is kind of made me laugh, is like, that's not how police officers talk. I don't think you understand how police officers talk. I guess they didn't know I was a police officer, right? I'm like, that's exactly how we talk. That dialogue between police officers is bang
Hmm.
on, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts, right? So I
Hmm.
thought that was a pretty funny review.
Hmm. I
But
don't know
so
where
the
this. Sorry, go
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead. I was
I
going to
I
say,
you
so the best
onto you.
review. Okay, sorry. So the best reviews, the ones that I like, you know, when they show up on blogs and the person took the time to go into detail about what they liked about your book.
Hmm.
Those in some and even within those great things that they say about your book, they have good criticism. I love those. Like those are great. So
Hmm.
Tony Jones from Horror DNA, he really liked two of my books.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't think he liked a couple other ones, but he really liked, I want to say three of my books he really, really liked. And I really liked his reviews. They were really good and in depth. And there's, you know, sometimes when you put a book out, I like it. Like I try not to think about my audience. I try to think about
Hmm.
what would I want to read, right? I love horror, what I want to read. I'm not trying to hop on any trends. I'm not trying to do anything like that. I don't care about that. You'll never see a book from me about, you know, you inherited a haunted house, right? Like I'm not doing one of
Yeah.
those books. I'm not going to do a book about a vampire in love, right? I'm not doing
Hmm.
that. Not to say that those books aren't good. Like Anne Rice did great books about vampires, and
Hmm.
there's some really, really good haunted house books out there. It's just not something I'm going to write about
Hmm.
because I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in making the reader go, wait, what? That's what I want from the reader, right?
Hmm.
And so I got a really good review on Murder Run um,
Hmm.
from a Vine voice. So, and he picked up on everything that I wanted to have in that book. Like I had 80s and 90s horror references in it.
Hmm.
Um, and it was like and it had like, it was just, so the book takes you a certain way and then
Hmm.
slaps you and makes you go another way. And he like picked up on that and he really enjoyed that. And I was like, yes. Cause like it's one of those books where I feel like I took a risk, right?
Hmm.
Because the main character you shouldn't like, right? So he was an unlikable person.
Hmm.
So I took a risk on that, on making him the main character. And so I didn't know what the feedback would be.
Hmm.
And the feedback's been really, really great on it. There's some people that obviously didn't like it, which I anticipated.
Hmm.
Um, but you know, and there's nothing, you like what you like, right? So it's
Yeah.
like there's nothing, if more people like it than not, then I think I've done an effective job. If more people dislike it than not, then should probably reevaluate how I delivered that story. Because a lot of
Hmm.
times everyone has great ideas. Everyone out there has a great idea. I'm not like, I know they do. It's just how you present it. The
Hmm.
presentation is key, right? So,
Yeah.
um, so if I think if I get a lot of people that don't like my work, then I'll look at how I presented it and maybe tighten that up a bit.
Hmm. I've only had a couple of reviews, and I don't know all the review sites yet from,
Mhm.
I guess, the pre-release. And one, it was negative, but it really cracked me up because
Yeah.
part of my journey is that I've had brain damage and memory loss, and from all the stuff that's happened to me. So I wrote it, and I established that I'm not a writer. I go very tangential.
Mhm.
You're going to do some time travel in this. It's not going to be linear like, a lot of
Yep.
books tend to be. And her first comments were, I don't understand this guy. He's all over the place. I couldn't have made it
Yeah.
any clearer. So you're always going to get those, and you can't really get too down on stuff like that. So,
No, there's the ones things that I might have a little issue with, and I don't want to say that I actually do have an issue with. I just so like sometimes I'll get a review of a 1 star, and they're like,
mhm.
um, I don't like horror. I thought I'd give it a try, right? So and then they're like, I thought
Yeah.
I'd give it a try, and then I realized I still don't like horror, and I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, that's a weird like one. I write horror. Like don't pick my books if you're trying to ease your way into horror, right?
Oh
Like
my,
I'm not an ease into horror type of person. And it's
that's your
weird.
next
Like my
book concept.
I know, right?
Right. The negative reviewers that keep dying.
Yes. No, it's like what like I said, like um I'm glad that that person picked up my book,
Mhm.
but it's like me reading a romance book and then saying I don't like romance and then leaving a
Mhm.
review about it. I already knew going into it I wouldn't like this book. So I think it's kind of disingenuous to leave a poor review when you knew beforehand you weren't going to like it because you're not
Mhm.
giving it a shot, right?
That's an
But
excellent point.
you do you. That's fine. Like, it didn't get me down. It just made me think, like, huh, right? Like I don't generally get down from reviews, anyways. I
Mhm.
try, like I said, I try to learn from them. If there's a good point there that I should be taking in consideration, then I'm gonna note that, and
Mhm.
and because I have notes of that stuff, I'll note that and I'll keep that going forward, right?
Mhm.
So all reviews are kind of helpful that way.
Are you mostly a handwritten note guy, or are you a digital guy?
It depends on my situation. If I'm walking the dog, I usually just have my phone, so I'll just throw it in
Mhm.
notes on my phone. But if I'm at home and I'm reading a book, and I take notes, if I'm on my Kindle, I'll use the Kindle to use the notes. If I'm
Mhm.
not, then I'll have a notepad to use
Mhm.
to write it down. So I guess it's situationally dependent, right?
Mhm.
But yeah.
So we're unfortunately running out of time.
Mhm.
So if people want to find one of your creepy writings, uh, what's the best place for them to find you if they want to you or do something like this?
Yeah.
How is the best way to get hold of you?
So my books are all over Amazon. So wherever you are in the world, my books are there. You'll see. What I'm really, really proud of is that I have like 5 full-length books out, and not
Mhm.
one of them has an average rating of under 4 star. So
Wow.
they all have over 4 star ratings, and I'm really, really proud of that because it's like
Mhm.
it's a hard niche, right, to work your way into. So I'm very happy and grateful for that. But yeah, so you can find me on Amazon. I have a YouTube channel where I discuss writing and how I implemented a routine for my writing. And they're short videos, like 3 minutes,
Mhm.
short, quick videos like that. I'm on, and it's John Hunt Fiction on YouTube. And for Twitter, Instagram. You'll find me at John Hunt Fiction on there, and on
Mhm.
Facebook you'll find John Hunt Fiction. Like I'm all that's the kind of the moniker I use across all
Mhm.
platforms. So I should be
We froze up a bit.
easy to. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm always grateful for people reaching out for me to talk, and I'm always open to questions and any insights you might have that will make me a better writer. I'm all for it.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I wish you much success going forward. I'm sure you'll have much success going forward. And to
Thank you
the
very much.
audience, thank you for tuning in to the Dead Man Walking podcast. Please like, subscribe, comment, share with your friends, go to John's various social medias, buy some of his books, and have yourself an awesome day. We'll see you next episode. Bye bye.